Hi, this is actually Gaspi, and well, before anything else, I would just like to congratulate the winners of the giveaway. I decided that there will be 3 winners instead of 2 because I really appreciate everyone's comments. So, the winners are Aishi, Julianne, and Manisha. So, because Julianne was my first commenter, she will be receiving the book of her choice, which is White Nights by Dostoevsky. Manisha and Aishi will be receiving the copy of Flowers for Thursday by Mia Tiham. So, for the winners, if you haven't replied yet to my comment, please do. And again, congratulations everyone. So for those who weren't able to join this giveaway, you can simply subscribe and stay tuned for more. Okay, well, so for today, we actually have another wrap-up of all the books that I've read this August 2025. So, for the month of August, it's actually Buwanang Wika or the National Language Month here in the Philippines. In celebration, I wanted to take part in this Akdang Pinoy campaign, which translates to works by Filipino authors. And so this campaign is very important to help increase readership in the country and of course promote local works. So for Akdang Pinoy, there's actually a prompt which is Pinoy, Pinoy. So for this prompt, each letter actually means P for poetry, I for illustrated, N for nonfiction, O for those that are outside of your comfort zone, and then Y for your favorite genre. And of course, for each genre, you have to pick books from local authors. So that's what Akdang Pinoy is all about. Let's begin! Starting with a poetry book. So this poetry book is Pagkupas ng Bituin, Pagsikat ng Araw. So this is the cover. I really like the cover. This is written by Kit from Packing Sheets. So in English, this is called Fading Stars, Rising Sun. So I didn't expect to like this poetry collection. I actually thought that it would be too cheesy. Not that there's anything wrong with being cheesy, it's just that I'm not really in that phase of my life right now. Instead, as I turned the pages and read more, it was actually pretty relatable, especially the parts when it felt like the author experienced something mundane and they were observant enough to get something out of that, to realize something new. For example, there's this one poetry about being too tired while riding a jeepney. And that's something that most Filipinos experience every day. Of course, you commute from work or from school, and then you're so tired. At the same time, you feel disturbed by a lot of other people around you. But of course, that's just how it is because you're not the only person in the world. A lot of people are also experiencing the same thing as you. They're having just as much of a tough time as you are. So yeah, that's what I really loved about this collection. Again, this is Fading Stars, Rising Sun by Kit or Pagkupas ng Bituin, Pagsikat ng Araw by Kit. So that's for poetry. For what's next? PI is illustrated. So the next one is Lucia Dreaming by Lucia Azul. So this book is a collection of all the dreams or nightmares experienced by Lucia. I just love all the illustrations. I started reading it on the day that I actually woke up from a nightmare myself. I decided to do so because I wanted to be comforted somehow that, I'm not the only one experiencing it. experiencing all these odd dreams. These nightmares don't really ruin the rest of my day, but it can definitely be difficult waking up from a nightmare. And so I'm glad that I already had the book delivered by that day. So yeah, like I said, it can be difficult waking up from a nightmare because then I would have to orient myself that everything's fine, it's not real, that I'm okay. Actually, I already woke up in the middle of that nightmare and I was kind of crazy enough to go back to sleep and with the intention of going back to that nightmare because I wanted to actually face it and, face it head on, change the course of the story somehow, only for it to take the turn for worse. But I'm proud of myself because at least I tried. And yeah, I just wanted to face it and apparently that's what I got. Anyway, I'm not going to delve deeper into what that dream was all about, but going back to the book, I just love that we get to see Lucia's notes at the end of the illustrations at the end of her collection. I really love that part because we get to see, or more like we get to know how she felt when she experienced that and then what kind of realizations she got from those. Because for me, it's really interesting to see how other people interpret them. Because as for these dreams and for our nightmares, I'm not sure if it's often talked about by other people. As for my own circle of friends, I do talk about some of them, but it's not really something that's, that you frequently talk about, and especially with a lot of people. And so this was really interesting to me for someone to be sharing something like that that's so vulnerable. I don't really like reading horror actually, especially without the illustrations, because I feel like the reading experience is different, because just simply reading feels to me like I'm injecting myself. Because of course when you're reading, you have to produce some of the things to complete the picture. But at least for me with the illustrations, I don't have to necessarily complete the visuals myself, but I can rely on those external stimuli on those illustrations from the author themselves, and I know that they're outside of me. So yeah, that's Lucia Dreaming by Lucia Azul. It's in English, so it would be very easy to read. Many people will be able to read it. So the next one from our prompt is N, which would stand for non-fiction. It's actually been a long time since I read something from that genre. I think the last one that I didn't read it, but more like I listened to it. This non-fiction book by Ali Abdaal, which is Feel Good Productivity. I think I listened to it 2024. Yeah. Anyway, so this book is more Pinay than we admit by a lot of authors, but it's actually edited by Maria Luisa T. Camagay. So this book is a collection of very important essays about the contributions of women throughout Philippine history, both the good and the bad. Feminism. Contrary to what some might think, feminism isn't about proving that women are better than men. Rather, feminism is about reaching this equality, and the book shows exactly that. They were ordered in a way that you have to be able to understand the works from an earlier timeline first before being able to reach the next. So it begins with exploring the Filipino women in the colonial period, and ends to expand on the future by teaching us how to record our own stories as women and why it's important to document them as we go through the different stages of our lives, because each stage is clearly different from one another. So the book answers many questions. Is Filipino culture inherently patriarchal? How relevant were the contributions of Filipino women in developing the society's culture and political engagement? Why don't we hear much from the greatest Filipino artists or writers? All the counterparts of Jose Rizal, the counterpart of Fernando Amorsolo. Like, where are these women? As listeners and writers, how do we put women at the center stage so we would be able to deliver articles that are not only about women, but for women? And those two are different. About and for doesn't mean that if something is about women, it's also for women. It's different. It can also be about women and still be for men. And this time we want to put women at the center stage and at the same time be something very important for women also. And of course, the book answers more questions than this. Personally, my experience with reading this book was such a ride, because I would go from understanding everything then understanding nothing. But maybe it's also because I was trying to read it without taking much breaks. For those in the academe, especially those in gender studies, I think this is a very good reference. In reading this book, it would really help a lot if you have already read, watched, or have seen a lot of classic works, because there are a lot of references that surround them. The book does provide snippets, but I think it's different. It's a different experience when you're able to appreciate the book, because you also know what the book is exactly talking about. Because in my experience, I was able to appreciate it more when I had prior knowledge of what was being talked about. So I think I'll be using this book to, to find books to read in the future, or to find films or paintings to see in the future. And one day I would like to be able to return to this book and appreciate it more and gain some more clarity. So yeah, I hope that more Filipinos would read this, more Filipinas would read this. I would really love to hear your thoughts. So the next one for our prompt, Pinoy. The next one is something that's outside your comfort zone. I chose to read The Shadow Immortals. I have a lot to say. This book is about a hybrid who loses his family. So by hybrid, I mean he's like a hybrid of two species. His father was killed and his mother has been missing. The boy meets his protector, and then they go on this journey together in search for his mother. So it becomes an adventure story that comes with grief, loss, and transcendence. Anyway, I didn't like this book. I just feel like I have a specific standard for fantasy books, because I know that it's fantasy, and so the author has to really work hard to convince me that it's not as out of this world as I thought. Just like how actors are not supposed to let you know that they're acting, but they're supposed to act. That's kind of how fantasy should be. So I guess what I'm specifically trying to find would be the depth of the characters. Just like from DC and Marvel, they have this well-rounded characters and they're very relatable, and their motivations, their intentions, their story, why they act in a certain way. They're consistent to their character. They're very believable even though they're not humans in that world or in that certain universe, and especially so they're not actually real, but they feel real because we find in them traits that are very human-like. And that's very important. So for a book that I didn't like, I actually have a lot to say because the book did have a lot of potential. So for the next few minutes, unlike the other books that I have discussed, this will actually contain spoilers because I really want to be able to properly express my thoughts. In the desolate planet of Econ resides two species, Axane and Ukwe elves. The Ukwe elves colonized the planet decades ago and remain the dominating force capable of mechanizing engineered vehicles and advanced weaponry. The Axane people are humanoid species with primitive knowledge that limited them to further advance their nation. The Axane tried to reclaim their planet by organizing an uprising, but with the Elven nation's warbred soldiers and weaponry, the Axane were defeated. Decades after the war, an Axane boy is in search of his mother. He embarks on a journey filled with tragedy, betrayal, and discovery of a new power destined to shape the future of their nation and homeworld. Look, okay, so first, I just don't understand why the supposed protector of the boy, who was of the same species that he was protecting the boy from, he didn't even know that hybrids were supposed to be considered as an abomination, especially by the queen. This made it difficult to immerse myself in the book because I knew that the conflict wasn't natural. He wanted to save the boy, but at the same time, he was also the reason that the boy was put in danger. Then we meet the daughter of the Queen of the Elves. She keeps on changing sides. She's so confused and she often doesn't know where to go. I think the author should have started the story right from the beginning of it all and should not have rushed the character arc, because it felt like the author was itching to get to the fight scenes instantly, which actually he did write pretty neatly, but it all felt premature and felt too convenient for the story. The descriptions of the fight scenes were good, but lacking in emotional depth. So they didn't feel real at all and they felt cartoonish to me. Many lines were off. A lot of them ended up in a way that I expected. I really felt like the book did have a potential, only if the author took the time to build the world properly and develop the characters more carefully, especially in a way that would make the readers care about the characters and their relationships to one another. There were definitely some implications in terms of how the supposed protector got attached to the boy, because he can be endearing somehow, but I still think it was premature. The writing style for me also felt like it wanted to be adapted to the screen. It's kind of like a screenplay. In terms of the technicalities of the narrative, it's okay, but still, like I said, it's lacking. It can be a page turner on some parts, but there's also friction between the parts when you think about the dialogue and when you think back on and reflect on the story itself. Most of the time, there wasn't enough justification as to why the character is acting that way. Maybe it's possible that the character is different from most of the people that we know, that we meet, but there has to be some kind of justification, some kind of backstory, some kind of reference to those type of decisions. For example, the mother didn't even react the way that I thought she would when the boy died. She wasn't angry at the killer. She tried to forgive her somehow. Realized that they need the killer to, be on their side so that they could defeat the other side. But that's not just a natural reaction of a mother. And if Somehow she's not like other mothers. There should have been a justification for why she reacted that way. For a mother, she was so stoic. Considering that this is the author's debut novel, I still think that his future as an author looks good. If he takes these things into consideration and take his time, I think that he will be able to write a better novel. Actually, I like sci-fi, but the kind of sci-fi that I like actually leans into the type like Black Mirror, the type of sci-fi that feels a little bit more like reality and not the Star Wars type. That's why I put this in the outside of my comfort zone part. So yeah, I'm explaining that because the next book is also sci-fi, but it's also part psychological. So yeah, that book is Her Last Cigarette Yesterday by Aline Alanige. My heart would race while reading this. I didn't actually read the trigger warning at first and only read the warning when I was already teary-eyed. So don't do what I did and know earlier on that this book contains some delicate subjects. And although I read the warning quite late, totally my fault, I tend to get excited when opening a new book. I appreciate the warning because not all books contain that. And for me, reading such subjects can be difficult, which is actually why I was hesitating whether which book would be outside of my comfort zone. Is it Her Last Cigarette Yesterday or is it The Shadow Immortals? Her Last Cigarette Yesterday is about the intertwining stories of characters in the field of neuroscience and psychology, and those fields are fields that I'm very interested in. Together, they work on a technology that can help people to recover their memories as part of their treatment. We often see doctors advocating for something, for a disease or a disorder, because they themselves experienced having a loved one suffering from those illnesses. I don't want to spoil much, but what I do want to say about this book is that this is a book that I will be adding to one of my favorite books this 2025. It touched on sensitive themes with such great care, making sure that it doesn't add things that would be too difficult for the reader or scenes that aren't necessary, because the book would already imply those things. It properly confronts those sensitive themes. It's just something that should be discussed because they're very important, because they are subjects that people should be aware of, and we shouldn't avoid those important discussions. It's very carefully written and there's no waste to every word. If it's there, then it's something that's needed for the plot. I highly recommend this book. So this video doesn't end with those 5 books. Another Filipino book that I actually read first last August. That book is Remains by Daryl Delgado. This book really feels personal to me. I think many Filipinos would also agree with me, given that we have multiple typhoons every year. Stories that surround them are all too familiar. And it's even more relevant right now that the corrupt officials, because they have been pocketing a lot of money from the Filipino people, it's not even a surprise that numbness to these catastrophes becomes a defense mechanism, especially when it's necessary to expect ourselves to be strong or to be resilient in order to face another day, another month, another year. Remains is set post Super Typhoon Yolanda, internationally known as Super Typhoon Haiyan, in which the main character becomes a vehicle for us to see first-hand accounts of what they experience in Tacloban. The characters may be fictionalized, but the stories are all too real. The Super Typhoon hit the Philippines in 2013. 7,350 dead or missing. 1.14 million houses were either destroyed or damaged. What makes this book stand out is how it highlights the ability of the olfactory sense to pull us back to our traumas, to our nostalgic memories that we may have long forgotten but that stays in our subconscious. Our main character, being a development worker whose job is to make reports, we become cognizant of the ethical dilemmas that come with the job. So from finding the best candidate to become the face of resilience to feeling like benefiting from other people's misery once the job is done. The internal battle is very complicated. We see here the effects of government corruption and negligence, a problem that we are supposed to be able to solve. At the end of the day, it's not even the typhoon that we are often the victim of. It's not even the typhoon itself that is scary. It's not even the typhoon itself that we are most afraid of. But the government that allows the loss of lives first before taking any disaster threat seriously. My heart ached reading this book, and I hope that many others would come across this book to reflect on the changes that have to be made for one's country. And this doesn't even apply to just the Philippines. There are a lot of countries whose governments are just as corrupt. And so this is a very important book. So yeah, that's quite a sad ending for this video. But there's definitely hope. As long as people come together, there's definitely hope. And right now we're doing this because we want to be able to promote readership. And yeah, as long as we are able to do this together, there is hope. So yeah, let me know what your current read is, and I would really love to discuss more things with you in the future. So this has been Axel Legaspi, and see you next time.